Hello, my name is Stephen Cole. I'm a senior scientist at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. The title of my presentation with co-authors is Who Does What and Why? Intra-household roles and explanatory models for sourcing soybean seed from the formal sector in Malawi. So while knowing who does what within the household may improve agricultural development program targeting to meet the needs of women and men, it may be equally important to know the rationale behind why individuals carry out certain tasks and whether the reasons indicated explain any more of the variation in household outcomes than that which is explained by who does what. So for example, we know from qualitative studies in Malawi that men are predominantly responsible for sourcing soybean seed. So private sector actors operating in the formal sector could use this information to inform their marketing or outreach strategies. Likewise, development actors could modify their programs to help increase women's involvement in obtaining improved soybean varieties from the formal sector. And through these efforts, there's increased likelihood that quality seed of improved varieties will be used by more smallholder farmers for enhanced productivity, profitability, and food and nutrition security. However, households might resemble each other on who carries out a specific task, but may differ on why they perform the task. In certain households, an individual may secure soybean seed because they are the head of household and in charge of purchasing key inputs. While in the other households, it's because they are more knowledgeable about seed quality. Thus, there may be some utility in collecting this information on why to inform the ways relevant actors working in the seed sector refine their targeting of smallholder households to help increase the uptake of improved seed. So with this in mind, our study that was recently published in Outlook on Agriculture explored the following specific research questions. 1, who sources soybean seed within the household? 2, what is the rationale used for determining who sources soybean seed? And 3, does who sources soybean seed and why help explain whether the household source seed from the formal sector? Overall, the agricultural sector is incredibly important for creating livelihood opportunities for Malawians in rural areas. Soybean is fast becoming a major cash crop in Malawi, and most of the soybean output in Malawi, which has more than doubled in recent years, is produced by smallholder farmers. The poultry industry drives the current demand for soybean in Malawi as a key ingredient in poultry feeds. To support this demand, improved soybean varieties that bring about increased yields or that mature earlier, for example, are more readily available in Malawi. Yet still, adoption rates of these varieties are relatively low at around 30%, according to Tufa et al.'s study that used nationally representative data. Our study took place in 3 districts in central Malawi: Mchinji, Lilongwe, and Dedza. These 3 districts are regarded as high potential for soybean production. Our study sample consisted of respondents who were in a marital relationship at the time of the study. Out of the sample of 399, 44% of the respondents were female. The main outcome or dependent variable in the study is where the household sourced their soybean seed during the prior agricultural season. So 1 if they sourced from the formal sector, and 0 if they sourced from the informal sector. Seeds sourced from the formal sector was exclusively improved varieties from reputable suppliers. Seed sourced from the informal sector, on the other hand, was a combination of improved and local varieties, often referred to as farmer-saved seed, obtained from neighbors, relatives, open markets, or recycled owned seed. Key independent variables were 1, who sources soybean seed within the household? Responses were coded into binary variables for wife without husband, husband without wife, or wife and husband together. And number 2, why the person or persons source soybean seed within the household. And responses were free listed, then coded, and then finally categorized according to the explanatory process they typified following a recent study by Bernard et al. So for example, in table 1, a response by a study respondent who indicated that a person in their household sources soybean seed because they own the land or manage soybean production was categorized as contribution model. If a respondent indicated a person in their household sources soybean seed because they are more knowledgeable or skilled at carrying out the task, the response was categorized as most informed model. We used 2 logistic regression models to analyze the data. In the first model, we only included who sources soybean seed, along with several control variables. In the second model, we also included the different explanatory model variables that were just described to help us determine if there is any added value to asking why, along with who, when predicting whether households obtained soybean seed from the formal versus the informal sector. So now on to the results. Regardless of whether the household sourced seed from the formal or informal sector, the majority of respondents indicated that husband without wife performed this task. In this next figure, we present the distribution of the models used to explain who sources soybean seed within the household at the aggregate level. Similar trends were found when the data were disaggregated at the formal and informal sector levels. When women source seed on their own, the majority of respondents indicated that their household employs a most informed model, followed by a separate spheres model. So when women primarily source soybean seed because they are either more knowledgeable about sourcing seed or have more time to source seed. When men source seed on their own, the majority of respondents indicated that their household employs a norms or most informed model when determining who should source soybean seed. Men primarily source soybean seed because they are the heads of households, responsible for sourcing seed given strong normative views that shape their involvement, or are more knowledgeable about sourcing seed. All respondents who replied that wife and husband jointly carry out the task, while few indicated their household uses a unitary model. Now to the results from running the 2 logistic regression models. In model 1, there were no significant associations between who sources soybean seed and whether the household sourced soybean seed from the formal sector. When adding the explanatory model variables in model 2, there were no changes to the relationship between who sources soybean seed and the outcome variable. However, the contribution model and the norms model were associated with a higher probability that the household sourced soybean seed from the formal sector compared to the unitary model. The responses that were considered as being characteristic of households using the contribution model, so those listed in that first table, table 1, included the person is the one managing soybean production. Sourcing soybean seed requires more energy or physical strength. The person has better transportation to source soybean seed. For those who indicated using a norms model, responses included as head of household, he has the capacity to source soybean seed. It is the person's job in Malawi to source soybean seed. So while men tend to be responsible for sourcing soybean seed within their households, their role in sourcing the seed does not influence whether they source from the formal versus the informal sector. In contrast, why a specific person sources soybean seed seems to be an important factor explaining whether the household sourced soybean seed from the formal sector. Compared to using a unitary model, when a contribution or a norms model is used, there's greater likelihood the household sourced soybean seed from the formal sector. So in conclusion, rural smallholders in Malawi use non-cooperative logics when determining who should source soybean seed, with increased probability of them sourcing seed from the formal sector when a contribution or a norms model is used. It appears there is some added value to considering who does what and why when carrying out analyses of agricultural roles and responsibilities within the household. More practically speaking, understanding why farmers source seed could improve the marketing and program targeting efforts of private and public sector actors who are interested in getting quality seed of improved varieties in the hands of a greater number of rural smallholder farmers. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and we acknowledge the following for their involvement in supporting this research. Thanks.